I used to be a model in New York, and I shot a soapbox for Ivory Soap. I was the mom on the box holding the baby the very same week that Behind the Green Door was just about ready to come out. So it was a PR man's dream, basically.
Marilyn Chambers didn't enter the entertainment industry through scandal. She began, like many other American girls, beautiful, ambitious, and dreaming of becoming a mainstream actress. She was once the face of purity, the Ivory Snow Girl, a young mother holding her baby on the box of Procter & Gamble baby detergent, trusted by millions of families. But that same face, that same body, would later appear in one of the most shocking adult films of the 1970s, Behind the Green Door. And from that moment, Marilyn Chambers' life veered onto a path from which there was no return. She became the symbol of the Porno Chic era, a time when adult films invaded mainstream theaters and were critiqued in the press as if they were art. But Marilyn was never called an artist. She wasn't invited to the Oscars. She was never given leading roles in mainstream films, even though her acting once made all of Vegas rise to its feet in applause. She embodied a paradox, too famous to be forgotten, but too controversial to be accepted. Her life was a collision of two opposing images, the wholesome family woman and the porn star, the artist and the outcast, the courageous and the lost. But what made Marilyn Chambers legendary wasn't what she did on screen. It was that she never apologized for being herself. Why was a woman so brave, so talented, forever imprisoned by the label of porn star? Why does Hollywood worship rebellion but could never make room for her? And what led someone who once stood at the peak of freedom to ultimately describe the very industry she helped shape as broken? Before she became a symbol of controversy, Marilyn Chambers was just a young girl with a perfectly ordinary birth name, Marilyn Ann Briggs. She was born on April 22, 1952, in Providence, Rhode Island, a place she always claimed as her true hometown, even though biographies often mistakenly list Westport, Connecticut, where she was raised. That confusion, in a way, foretold her life story. People constantly saw her wrong, assigned her places, roles, and identities she never chose. Marilyn's family was middle class. Her father worked in advertising, a world perpetually busy crafting images for others. Her mother was a nurse, a healer, a caretaker. She was the youngest of 3 children. Her brother, Bill Briggs, once played keyboard for the band The Remains, a group that had the honor of opening for the Beatles on their final U.S. tour. But unlike her brother, Marilyn wasn't drawn to the lights of rock stages. She was captivated by a different dream: acting. During high school in Westport, Marilyn was a cheerleader, a member of the drama club, and someone unafraid to break the mold. At 16, she began modeling despite her father's disapproval, a man who knew too well the cruelty of both advertising and entertainment. But Marilyn didn't listen. She forged her mother's signature to skip school, boarded a train to the city just to make it to a casting call. From the very start, she proved she wasn't someone who waited for opportunity. She created it at any cost. That drive soon brought results, a few small modeling contracts, and notably a silent bit part in The Owl and the Pussycat, 1970, a romantic comedy starring Barbra Streisand. In the film, Streisand played a sex worker, a bitter irony, as just a few years later, Marilyn herself would take on a role far more provocative. But at that moment, she was still just a wide-eyed girl with a pure cinematic dream. It was also during this time that Marilyn was offered a modeling gig for a soap brand. It wasn't a major contract, but it would end up changing her life. She became the face of Ivory Snow detergent. Ivory Snow wasn't just a detergent. It was a cultural symbol of American purity during the 1960s and 1970s. In that context, the face of Marilyn Chambers, still an unknown at the time, appeared on the box with the image of a gentle young mother cradling her newborn. No heavy makeup, no sensuality, no lines of dialogue, just soft eyes and a warm smile. She embodied innocence, trust, and was embraced by millions of housewives. She became the symbol of safety, family, and American clean. That's precisely what made her later transformation one of the biggest shocks in modern advertising history. But in the early 70s, Marilyn Chambers didn't see it that way. To her, the contract with Procter & Gamble was a significant step forward in her modeling career. It brought her to promotional events in Los Angeles and San Francisco, places where she began to catch the scent of another world. A world far less gentle than the glow of an ad studio. A world where men's eyes no longer stopped at her face. After her supporting role in The Owl and the Pussycat, Marilyn's film career hit a lull. Mainstream directors didn't call. She didn't land another role. Hollywood had no use for a girl too sweet to be memorable. So she left her hometown of Westport and moved to San Francisco, hoping to hold on to the industry somehow. There, she made a living doing odd jobs, semi-nude modeling, dancing without underwear in nightclubs, jobs a serious actress would typically avoid. But to Marilyn Chambers, opportunity didn't come in high or low. It came in yes or no. In 1972, a small classified ad in the San Francisco Chronicle changed her life entirely. It invited anyone interested in auditioning for a major motion picture. No plot details, no mention of genre, no famous director, but for Marilyn, it was the light at the end of the tunnel. She went to the audition with excitement, then froze. This wasn't a typical casting. It was a selection for an adult film titled Behind the Green Door, produced by the Mitchell brothers. She wanted to leave, but before she could walk out, Artie and Jim Mitchell, two eccentric and ambitious men, had already noticed her. They whispered, "She looks just like Sybil Shepherd." They stopped her, took her to their office, explained the script. The story was about a San Francisco heiress kidnapped and taken to a secret sex club. No lines, only actions, only expressions. No need for complex acting, just an innocent face and a body willing to bear it all. The Mitchell brothers thought they'd found their golden girl. Marilyn sat silently, listening to the script. At first confused, then intrigued. Suddenly, she set her terms. "I'll do it if I get paid well, receive 10% of the profits, and all actors are tested for STDs." No one in the industry had ever made such demands. But the producers agreed because they knew that to make history, you had to bet on contradiction. And there was no greater contradiction than the Ivory Snow Girl in a bold, wordless sex film. Marilyn agreed, not because she needed the money, but because she wanted fame, recognition, and perhaps deep down a part of her wanted to challenge the very image society had imposed on her. She signed, the cameras rolled, and from that moment on, the soapbox was no longer innocent. When Behind the Green Door premiered in late 1972, no one, not even Marilyn Chambers herself, could have foreseen its explosive impact. At a time when American society was caught in a tug-of-war between sexual liberation and moral conservatism, the film dropped like a cultural bomb. It wasn't just screened in major theaters, something nearly unheard of for an adult film. It also became a topic of mainstream press coverage, critical debate, and even feminist discourse. And then the revelation came. The woman at the center of this film was none other than the Ivory Snow Girl, the symbol of purity once printed on every Procter & Gamble baby detergent box. A media firestorm erupted. The soap company immediately pulled Marilyn's image from the product. Households that once proudly purchased those boxes now displayed them like forbidden collector's items. But the irony was undeniable. The louder the moral outrage, the longer the lines at the theaters. The backlash made Behind the Green Door one of the highest-grossing adult films of all time. The Mitchell brothers knew they had a media weapon in their hands. They turned scandal into marketing. Marilyn Chambers, the angel on the soapbox, was now promoted as the 99.44% impure girl, a twisted echo of the Ivory Snow slogan, 99.44% pure. That clash, pure and impure, was what made her a legend. In the film, Marilyn had no lines. She played a woman taken to a mysterious sex club, where she experienced scenes of lesbian encounters, group sex, and notably, the first interracial sex scene ever shown in a commercially released adult film. No one could say for certain whether what was happening on screen was real or staged, and that ambiguity only made it harder to look away. What few expected was that Marilyn saw the lack of dialogue as a golden opportunity. She treated it as an acting challenge. All I had was my face to show everything. If I wasn't real, the audience would know. And they believed in pleasure, in obsession, in the blur between nurturing mother and blazing temptress. It was only after filming Wrapped that Marilyn revealed to the Mitchell brothers she was the Ivory Snow Girl. They were stunned, then laughed, then crafted a media campaign. And soon enough, Marilyn Chambers became a name the whole of America whispered, whether in desire or in outrage. She didn't just become a star. She became a symbol of a cultural shift, where purity was no longer the only ideal, and what had once been labeled dirty could be art if someone dared enough. Marilyn Chambers, the woman who once cradled a baby on a detergent box, was now cradling a whole generation of American viewers through forbidden zones never before named. And they followed her, willingly, breathlessly, never seeing her the same way again. Marilyn Chambers never wanted to be forever labeled a porn star. From the moment Behind the Green Door gained fame, she held on to the hope that this notoriety, even if born from adult cinema, could be a springboard into mainstream film. But she quickly learned a brutal truth. Hollywood loved boldness, but it did not forgive those who crossed the boundaries it quietly set. Chambers continued working with the Mitchell brothers on the resurrection of Eve, another adult film, but one with a defined script and characters designed to reinforce her image as the all-American girl next door. Sweet, proper, yet yearning for freedom. But that was also the last time she let the Mitchell brothers steer her path. She walked away, not just in search of new roles, but to reclaim herself. She turned to Chuck Traynor, the man famously known as Linda Lovelace's ex-husband and the face behind Deep Throat. Traynor became her new manager, and later, her second husband. The decision sparked controversy, especially after Lovelace later accused Traynor of abuse and coercing her into pornography. But at the time, Chambers still believed he could help her escape her past and step into Hollywood's inner circle. She began landing auditions for major film projects, but every open door turned out to be a trap. At a meeting with Jack Nicholson and Art Garfunkel to discuss a role in Goin' South, 1978, the conversation quickly derailed. They asked if she had any cocaine. Then they pressed her relentlessly about her sex scenes in Behind the Green Door. Were they real? Did she actually feel pleasure? Marilyn stood up and walked out, furious and humiliated. Another opportunity, playing a porn star in Hardcore, 1979, slipped away as well. Despite her first-hand experience fitting the role perfectly, the director felt she looked too innocent to convincingly portray a porn actress. A bitter paradox. Too famous for sex to be taken seriously, but not dirty enough to play herself. Legendary director Nicholas Ray, Rebel Without a Cause, once cast her in City Blues, a serious drama where she would star alongside Rip Torn as a prostitute defended by an alcoholic lawyer. Ray believed she could be the next Katharine Hepburn, with sorrowful eyes and silent strength. But then Ray spiraled into addiction. The project collapsed. Another chance vanished. Marilyn was never forgiven, not because she lacked talent, but because she never hid her past. In an era when fame meant living two-faced, Chambers insisted on living with one and paid the price in rejection. "I don't apologize for what I did. I'm just disappointed they never saw anything beyond it," she said in a mid-80s interview. And that was the rawest truth. Marilyn Chambers may have bared herself before the camera, but it was Hollywood that truly stripped her. of every chance she ever had. Shut out by Hollywood, Marilyn Chambers didn't disappear. She refused to stand quietly in the shadows like so many former stars. Instead, she pivoted, turning to less conventional forms of art, spaces wide enough for her to keep living, working, and redefining herself. If she couldn't step into the cathedral of cinema, she would build her own stage, with music, theater, writing, and even politics. In 1974, Chambers surprised many by starring in the stage comedy The Mind with the Dirty Man in Las Vegas. It was a small venue, a racy adult play, but performed with an unexpected seriousness and charm. Not only did she hold her ground, she triumphed. The show ran for 52 consecutive weeks, setting a record as the longest-running theatrical production in Las Vegas at the time. The city's mayor awarded her the honorary Key to the City for her cultural contributions. In a city known for spectacle, Marilyn Chambers earned something rarer: respect. She didn't stop at theater. She ventured into music. In 1976, she released the disco single Benihana, a sensual, metaphor-laden song about Asian love, produced by Michael Zager. The track charted and was described by Billboard as unexpectedly subtle, sexy, and graceful. Chambers didn't sing like an actress dabbling in music. She sang like a woman who had lived and been judged. Later, she led a country music band called Haywire, performing regularly in and around Las Vegas. Though she never reached major stardom, she was undeniably a working artist. She was also a writer. Her memoir, My Story, 1975, was neither embellished nor melancholic, just a candid retelling of her life. She wrote about sex, hidden backstage truths, fame, and loneliness, without asking for permission. In 1977, she collaborated with sexual icon Xaviera Hollander on Xaviera Meets Marilyn Chambers, and continued writing columns on pleasure and feminism. In 1981, Chambers released 2 sex guidebooks, Sensual Secrets and the Illustrated Kama Sutra, where she presented sexual knowledge like an expert, never cheaply. She didn't perform sex, she analyzed it, shared it, and owned it. And then, as if that wasn't enough, Marilyn stepped into an entirely unexpected arena: politics. In 2004, she ran for Vice President of the United States with the Personal Choice Party, a platform rooted in personal liberty. Though she received fewer than 1,000 votes, she returned in 2008 as a write-in candidate alongside Charles J. No one seriously believed she would win, but her name on the ballot was a declaration: I am not just a body on screen, I have a voice, and it can echo wherever I choose. In every realm she entered, Chambers didn't wait to be invited. She came in with the determination to break boundaries. When the front door was closed, she kicked in the side door and walked through anyway. She may not have achieved the fame she once dreamed of, but she was never one to retreat. Marilyn Chambers didn't chase legitimacy, she chased presence. And to her, that was enough. Marilyn Chambers was a woman in the public eye, but in private, she often felt unbearably alone. The men who passed through her life weren't just lovers, they were allies, managers, and at times, threats. If the stage lights made her look radiant and unbreakable, then behind the curtain, she was a soul endlessly searching for safety among wounds that never healed. Her first husband was Doug Chapin, a street artist she met while he was busking with bagpipes in San Francisco. They married in 1971, a spontaneous union of youth. But the relationship dissolved just 3 years later as Chambers' career took a direction Chapin couldn't follow. They divorced quietly. No scandals, no drama, just 2 people no longer walking the same path. Then came Chuck Traynor, fresh off a divorce from Linda Lovelace, the deep-throat icon who would later accuse Traynor of abuse, control, and coercion into porn. At the time, Chambers saw no danger. What she saw in Traynor was someone who understood the industry and might help her step out from the shadow of the Mitchell brothers. Traynor became her manager and second husband. They spent a decade together, navigating her peak fame and Hollywood's cold shoulder. But inside that relationship was a Marilyn slowly losing control. Not the woman who once set the terms, but someone caught in a downward spiral of addiction and exhaustion. By the mid-1980s, Chambers had hit rock bottom with alcohol and cocaine. She lived fast, recklessly, like tomorrow didn't exist. Naked performances, endless parties, blackouts between hotel rooms and backstage areas, all of it became routine. And then fate handed her an unexpected turn. William Taylor Jr., a truck driver with no ties to show business. They met through a blind date. After the first evening, Taylor called Chambers and told her he couldn't continue the relationship. He was a recovering heroin addict. The response enraged Marilyn so deeply that she kicked through a wall and broke her own leg. But Taylor didn't walk away. He visited her in the hospital, kept showing up. Not as a glamorous lover, but as someone who helped her believe in peace again. She joined Narcotics Anonymous, gave up all stimulants, changed her Lexus license plate to Love NA, a message to the world, I've chosen to live again. They married in 1990. In 1992, she gave birth to McKenna Marie Taylor, a milestone in the life of a woman once reduced to a sexual symbol. But happiness didn't last. In 1994, they divorced. No accusations, no bitterness. Simply this: Marilyn was never truly built for an ordinary life. She had tried to be a wife, a mother, someone who slowed down, but deep inside, she was always a woman carrying unhealed scars. When asked if she had regrets, Chambers once said, "I lived truthfully." And that always comes with a price. For Marilyn, love was never an escape. It was a shelter, a cool breeze amid the searing heat of life. And though she married 3 times, though she endured many breakups, one thing never changed. Marilyn Chambers never waited to be saved. She just needed enough time to pull herself out of the abyss. After decades of scandal, spotlight, and rejection, the final years of Marilyn Chambers' life were no longer as turbulent. She had stepped away from adult films, no longer appeared on major television shows or stages, but she didn't vanish. Marilyn remained present in fairs, autograph sessions, places where loyal fans stood in line just to see her, take a photo, and say thank you. To them, she wasn't a sex symbol. She was someone who dared to live truthfully in a world full of lies. In a society that had changed so drastically since the 1970s, Marilyn Chambers' fame was no longer draped in scandal but shaded in nostalgia. She had become a part of pop culture history, like a once banned film reel, now studied, analyzed, and respected. Yet beneath her strong exterior, Marilyn Chambers began to show emotional cracks. In a rare 2004 interview, when asked if she would recommend anyone follow in her footsteps, she paused for a long time and said, "I would say, don't. This industry breaks you. It leaves you empty. Get a day job. And don't give it up." It wasn't an apology, nor was it a rejection of her entire path. It was a late awakening, like a survivor looking back on a battlefield and admitting she had lost more than she ever imagined. And then on April 12, 2009, just 10 days before her 57th birthday, Marilyn Chambers was found dead by her 17-year-old daughter in their modest suburban home in Santa Clarita, California. No paparazzi. No one saw it coming. She passed quietly. No scandal, no headlines, no chasing media. The coroner's report later revealed she had died from a cerebral hemorrhage caused by an aneurysm related to heart disease. Traces of painkillers and antidepressants were found in her blood, but not in fatal amounts. A peaceful death, as if at last her body had been granted rest. Perhaps the cruelest irony was that only after her passing did many begin to speak of Marilyn Chambers as a pioneer, a unique case, a strange feminist voice within an industry so often accused of exploiting women. But she wasn't there to hear it. No one left to let her scoff and say, "I told you so." With Marilyn's death, it wasn't just a person that faded. It was a symbol, uncomfortable but unforgettable, that had completed its journey. A life not glorious in the conventional sense, but honest in every ache. A legacy born from being misunderstood, but impossible to ignore. Marilyn Chambers was never honored at a prestigious award ceremony. She doesn't have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, nor does her name appear in film history textbooks. But none of that can erase the truth that she forever changed the way the world sees the adult film industry and the women within it. She was the first to break the stereotype that porn actresses had to look depraved, damaged, or dirty in the eyes. On the contrary, she brought with her a face that radiated trust. The same face once printed on baby soap boxes, the face of a mother, a good girl. That contradiction bewildered the public, stirred up the media, and left society unsure of how to categorize her. And that very confusion is what made Marilyn Chambers irreplaceable. With Behind the Green Door, she helped give birth to the Porno Chic era, a brief but revolutionary moment when adult films were shown in mainstream theaters and reviewed by serious film critics as a legitimate art form. Alongside Deep Throat, her film dragged discussions of sex, morality, and personal freedom out of the shadows and into the public eye. But while Linda Lovelace came to be seen as a victim of the industry, Marilyn Chambers embodied another paradox, a woman in control calling the shots, turning herself into a legend, on her own terms, with no permission and no instruction. She never called herself a feminist, but her actions, from negotiating her contract with the Mitchell brothers, to writing about sex with unapologetic authority, to running for political office, were all declarations of a woman's right to choose her body, her profession, and her voice. In an industry often dominated by men, Marilyn Chambers refused to play the passive role. She was the one who demanded, negotiated, and often closed the deal. Her influence still echoes in modern debates about sexual freedom, the stigma surrounding adult performers, and how society treats women who step outside traditional moral frameworks. Her image, once branded as dirty, wrong, or corrupt, now appears in cultural studies, sociological texts, and gender theory panels. Hollywood may never have given Marilyn Chambers a mainstream role, but time gave her something far greater, an undeniable place in the history of American popular culture, and that's something no box of soap could ever wash away. Marilyn Chambers was never someone easy to love, not in the way society prefers. She didn't live to please audiences, didn't apologize for her past, didn't hide her mistakes, and never begged for forgiveness. She existed like a thorn in the eye of the morally pristine, and a goddess to those who believed in absolute freedom. And that alone made her a figure no one could label simply. Her life was a chain of conflicting choices, from the good girl to a porn star, from cradling a baby on a soapbox to bearing herself on camera, from aspiring serious actress to reappearing on burlesque stages, from vice presidential candidate to rehab patient with a license plate that read, "Love N.A." A life where every chapter made the public turn their heads, out of shock, judgment, curiosity, or quiet admiration. Marilyn once said, "I don't regret anything. I just wish they had looked a little closer at me." A sad sentence, but also the truth. She was never seen through honest eyes. She was caught between extremes, too famous to be forgotten, yet too dirty to be honored. No one dared call her a legend until she was gone. But now, with time pushing back the weight of old prejudice, we can say it more fairly. Marilyn Chambers was one of the most significant and overlooked figures in 20th century pop culture, not because of what she did on screen, but because she dared not to run from it. What do you think about the paradoxical and fearless life of Marilyn Chambers? If you could ask her one question, what would it be? Leave your thoughts below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe so we can keep uncovering the real stories behind cultural legends.